Yeah.
You don't have to have an issue. So yeah, great pleasure to launch these series of toolkits. For me, I'm speaking from two hats. Firstly, as the Associate Pro Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation in the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences. So from that perspective, this is really important, because for the University of Bristol, our internationalization and working with the Global South in collaboration is something that's very much at the center of the university strategy. And obviously we have to work in a way that is equitable, inclusive, that doesn't impose our agendas, and understands some of the challenges that the Global South have in doing that research. So making it truly and mutually beneficial partnership. And then secondly, from a kind of personal point of view, I'm also a professor of clinical epidemiology. I run a cancer epidemiology program, and I've just started recently, in October, I went to the University of Botswana, because I'm very keen to develop my own networks in Botswana, South Africa, and potentially other Southern African countries. So I learned a lot from that trip and started to develop relationships. And then reading some of the issues that come up here in terms of travel, in terms of budget allocation, etc., etc. I do think that those things are incredibly important, and these series of toolkits will be incredibly useful. And I've already started doing one of the things that was mentioned, which is trying to start by small networking grants. And I do think that's a really good piece, as long as with all the other really good advice that's in those toolkits, things like that are really important. And so, yeah, I would recommend if you're starting off the small networking grants approach, because that is starting to prove really fruitful. So I will launch the event.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Richard. So we don't have a very long program, as you can see. We'll be doing some presentations for the next 1 hour, and then we'll have a short Q&A discussion session. So I'll start off by just giving an overview of the project. As you may know by now, TEPSO is an acronym for Towards Equitable Partnerships with Global South. It was an internally funded project by the research culture, and we got 2 rounds of funding. And this is University of Bristol funding, thanks to UKRI Research England. And we implemented the project between October 2023 and 2024. And there were 2 work packages, hence the 2 toolkits that we are launching today. So this is the project team. I was the lead. I'm Anthony Manyara. I'm a senior research associate here at the University of Bristol. I was supported by Dapo, who was a research support assistant and now a honorary research associate. He'll be presenting one of the toolkits. And we had an advisory panel which met monthly to support and oversight the project. Simon, who is joining online, will speak later on. Jorge is not able to join us today. Tafadzwa, who joined as a PhD student in London School, is now staff here and is in the audience. Eyob will speak later on and is in the audience. Celia is in the audience and will speak later on, and Liang was not able to join us today. So with that, I'll hand over to Dapo, who is online, and he will take us through the first toolkit on visa and passport equity. So Dapo, if you're able to share your screen.
Right, confirming you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dapo Awobeku, and I will take us through the slides. Essentially, I have some minutes to speak on the toolkit to improve visa and passport equity in global North and South research partnerships. So starting by what we have done, so what we first did was we wanted to understand what the issues are, and we then conducted a quantitative survey using JIX with 53 staff in the US of Bristol, and we had 22 Global South collaborators as well. Secondly, we then conducted follow-up interviews with 12 respondents, 4 from UOB and 8 from the Global South. Having done the interviews, we then used descriptive analysis and semantic analysis to analyze the data we got from the quant and the qualitative study. And then lastly, findings from the study informed a toolkit that we worked on. We had developed the first draft and then shared with user participants, or we shared with participants to inform the final version of the toolkit. So 4 things that we did to just really understand what the issues were and what likely or potential solutions can also be. Right? And then we were able to sort of arrive at what exactly the issues were and why they're important. So first thing we can see, there was this conference that was recently moved last year from Canada to Indonesia because it was realized that people could not get visas to attend the program in Canada. So in a very short time, that's moved the venue. Interestingly, the writer is the director of NIHR, Global Health, in the UK as well. So that highlighted that challenge with getting visas. Another article here had mentioned how that some scholars are more important than others, visa barriers, passport privilege, and global academic mobility. In a tweet by someone on Twitter, of course, the person had said, I find visa applications to be such an undignifying experience. And someone responded to say, in quotes, please let me visit your country for 4 days. I have money, I have a job, I have family members that love me, I won't run away. And that's how that person interpreted applying for a visa to be like. Someone else from the study we had conducted had mentioned the fact that the process and documentation are a lot, and the reality is that even when you show this, you still can get rejected. So we see 2 things that come up. There's the cost and there's the documentation, which sometimes is a lot. Someone had also then mentioned that if you translate the amount of money that goes into every visa application, which can be from £100 to £200, it's much money in the currency where people are coming from. And then lastly, someone had mentioned that the whole visa application process, indeed, the very need for visas for Global South citizens is immense. And I hope that one day in the future, we would look back at it as a form of human rights violation that used to be performed in a barbaric past. So these 3 responses from those who had interviewed, the tweets we can see, the studies that have been published have shown to some extent why this is an issue and why it's important that it should be addressed. Now, the next question we need to ask as we reflect deeply on these challenges, who can address this, right? It's one thing to have this problem. It's one thing to have listened to those that have gone through it. And it's another thing to understand, how do we fix it? How do we go from here? And in this study on Imagine a Future in Global Health Without Visa and Passport Inequities, what the researchers have gracefully done for us is to see and highlight who actually has power to address us. So they have done a stakeholder matrix to say who has high power, who has high interest, who has low power, low interest, medium power. And what they found out is that academic institutions in the global north, national level non-governmental organizations, academic institutions or coalitions of the global north, and event organizers, alongside professional societies, have medium power, medium interest, right? Because they can't change policy in that sense immediately. We have government to do that, which is why we have them as high power. Unfortunately, they have low interest, right? So what we've seen clearly is that we are speaking to academic institutions currently, and we know that reducing visa and passport inequities would require more efforts than academic institutions global north can address. However, our research's immediate focus is to propose solutions that, if implemented truly, can reduce the impact on global south researchers. Of course, why we would do this, and hopefully this helps move the needle a bit, we are clear on the fact that we need more efforts to get the buy-in of high power, high interest groups, like the international government organizations like UN High Commission for Refugees, or better still, high power, low interest groups like the HIC governments, who can actually move the needle faster. But depending when that happens, some of the things we have proposed can be done by academic institutions, HEIs in the UK, can be done by even those applying themselves, and hopefully that helps move the needle. So the scope of this research essentially focuses on travel for research partners between the Global South and Global North, and specifically the UK. Now, to say that, we understand that travel between those countries happen for many reasons. There are students that would just want to travel for their master's program, for example. There are those that would want to travel for research visits. There are those that would want to travel for many other reasons. But the focus for this study is on research visits between the Global North and South, and specifically the UK. Now, before I go to considerations, based on findings from the research that we have done, based on the insights we gathered, we then developed a toolkit with 6 considerations, which we termed considerations for visa and passport equity. So I'll speak to them very briefly because of time, but the good thing is that in the toolkits that we are launching today, which you will see shortly, we have these considerations explained in a very robust manner, and you would see why these issues are important and what actions can be done for each of these considerations. So the first one is inclusive, fair, and equitable research partnerships. And what we are saying clearly is that Global South partners should be viewed as equal participants in research. So there should be that two-way mobility, UK to Global South to UK, right? And that also should address agenda sets in dominance by the Global North, which is fair, which is key to fair partnerships. So an action is, before an event or before a research decision is made, plan for those trips, right? For both regions, agree on travel schedules, agree on frequency of visits by Global South partners, because we've seen that this can actually affect a few things. Secondly, budgeting for all visa application costs. Now, sometimes it's assumed that £100 is not such a lot of money. But for example, in Nigeria, where I'm from, £100 is about 200,000 naira, which, I mean, for context, Nigeria's minimum wage is about 70,000 naira. So it means that I'll probably spend 2-3 months of some person's income on applying for a visa. So in those people's country, it might be a lot more money. So what we are saying is include visa fees in the budget, right? Include transportation, include flights, all of those things in budget. Also then ensure there's that very early discussion with finance to get timely reimbursement where needed. The third one is to facilitate documentation support application. Now, what is clear by everyone that has gone through this process is your paperwork is as important as getting it or not getting it. So UKOs should be able to ensure that all documentation are provided, and they also guide the partners in ensuring that they have all that is needed, which can be a lot sometimes. So an action is to guide partners through the visa types, ensure accurate documents, and provide support letters if needed. The good thing also with this that we've done is one of the documents we would show you soon is that template required to develop a letter, or the different letters required, and a checklist that you can just use to ensure that you have all you need to travel. The fourth consideration is timeliness. And what we are saying here is it's lengthy, sometimes longer than planned. So what we suggest is develop your timelines very early, and 3 months before the visits, before the travel, please apply way ahead of time in advance. The fifth one is communicate effectively. What we are saying here is there's the need for that open and effective and continuous communication between the visiting partner and the host. And an action is just to ensure there are clear and well-defined feedback channels so that if things go wrong, it's just clear what is happening, right? And then last one is explore buffers and alternatives. Unfortunately, things can go wrong. Unfortunately, despite best plans and best efforts and right documentations, it could still get rejected. And what we are saying is have a plan B. It could be that you might explore a virtual option, or you could use another venue like we saw in that study I mentioned as well. And so what we are saying as an action, or some actions to be done, is one, consider the location, ensure it's visa friendly, have debriefing sessions. And like one of the things we had seen in the study, some people take the responses in a not so great way and it affects them. So if possible, where possible, provide support, counseling, other support if the visa is rejected for people. So those are the considerations that we have, 6 of them. And when you download the documents, you would see them explained more than I have done, definitely. You see them also explained with more actions and why these considerations are very important. So we have a few resources that we had come up with based on the study. We have invitation and support letter templates, which are required by Global North partners. And this detailed the type of visa being applied for, the purpose of the visit, the funding availability, amongst other things. So this is required very much so. And then we have secondly, a debriefing guide. Now, this helps provide questions that can aid in accessing what was done properly, right? And just help reflect on what we could do better and where we could maybe reapply if necessary. Then we have a considerations worksheet. And I will just show very brief screenshots on what this look like. And like I said, once you download this tool, which I'll show you how to do very soon, you can access it. So we have a consideration worksheet that can help researchers carefully reflect on the considerations proposed in the toolkit. And then lastly, there's the accessible location worksheet, not developed by us primarily, it was worked on by Campaigns and Global Health, but it has a long list of countries and different columns on visa availability and various things that you can use to then arrive at the countries for a particular conference or not. So I have screenshots of the invitation letter templates. We have comments that will help you tweak it to your need, right? And just what you need to put here, add one sentence for this different thing or not. We have an employer supporting letter template as well, which is what you see to my right. Then we have a visa letter guidance, right, which details all you need to have ready for your application. Then, like I mentioned, we have a debriefing guide. And lastly, we have the considerations worksheets, which you just fill with yes, no, not yet. That helps you determine if you're ready for this event or not. I would then move very quickly to doing a demo of where we have hosted this resource. And if you can see my screen, which I believe you should, what I'm doing first is to copy the link, which I believe is in the chat as well. So for those online, copy the link, go to your browser, which I'm going to do. I'm hoping you can see my screen very clearly. So go to your browser and paste that there. Once you do, you would see sign in and register. We advise that you register, which is what I will do very quickly. So my name is Dapo. My surname is Awobeku. My email address is andramadiva12@gmail.com. My password, of course, there are things I need to ensure in setting my password. So let's ensure that. So Bristol. Confirm the password. Then I need to confirm I'm not a robot because it doesn't know. And then I would register. So it then sends a verification, which I need to do. So I'll go to my email address very quickly. And hopefully it drops now. Now I need to verify my mail. Click on this. And it's verifying my email. So welcome to University of Bristol's Express Licensing Portal. What I need to quickly do is pick up the link again from the chat and just type it in here. 1 minute. Right, let's drop it here. Now it has me registered. So I'll then come to order now, just to mention that it is absolutely free. What is just important first is to ensure that you are registered and you have a link, or you have registered and you have an account. So what I want is the TEPSO toolkit. I can then check out now. I want just one. And so it asks for organization name, department, and organizational type. I work with Village Reach. Departments, let's say Global Health. Of course, it's optional, but it will be helpful to know so that we can in this resource as well. So, and once I put my organization name, the department, organization type, I'll click continue. And again, you can see it's free. You're not paying for this at all. I will then see the non-commercial user license, acknowledge this. Hopefully you get to read it. It's not long. We've made it not too long so that you don't just glance through and just move to the last stage like we do many other documents. So submit request, and you should be able to have all the documents you need in a minute. Great. So progress information, order submitted, terms and agreements done. You're not making any payments. You have all the documents you need. So you can see the visa and passport toolkits, the considerations checklist, the visa and passport inequities findings. So like I mentioned, we did a study. We had 53 people that we had quantitative tools filled by. We had interviews. So we have about 10 or so pages of documents with those findings. We have a debriefing guide as well. We have the visa letter guidance for Global South partners. We have the employer supporting letter templates, and we have the template edition. We can all download each of these things, and you would have access to them on your laptop, whatever device you use. So for example, I've downloaded the visa and passport toolkits, and I have access to all of this. So that's how it works. It's very simple. And it's the same process for the budget as well. So I'll stop here and hand over to Anthony to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dapo. I don't know whether you can hear the applause from the room. Yeah. So just to say that Dapo is not here with us, and the reason he's not here with us is not related to visa and passport inequities, just in case you are wondering. So I'll now take you through the next toolkit, which is the budget toolkit. I'll just share. Yeah, so I believe you can now see my screen for those who are online. So the process of getting the toolkit will be the same as what Dapo has shown you. For those who are in the room, there are toolkits, hard copies. Feel free to take a number of copies if you need, and there is also a chart that you can hang in your office for both of the toolkits. So I'll start off by just mentioning some of the sources of budget inequities, and then I'll mention about the toolkit. So one of the main issues on budget inequities is disproportionate and unfair budget shares. So we have a research project going on in Global South, how much money remains in Global North. So this is a letter that was published in 2021 in Nature Medicine. And after the letter was published, a week later, it was picked up by Daily Nation in Kenya. And that is the screen grab you see on your right. And so what these researchers were saying is in the first two paragraphs, the main issues. So it was a 30 million US grant. It was awarded to 7 institutions in the US, UK, and Australia, and no African institution was named. And while this might seem an extreme example, issues on disproportionate and unfair budget shares are contentious issues and main issues when it comes to budget for Global North-South collaborations. This is another article in another Nature journal, and this was by these two authors who mention some sources of inequities. They mention various sources, but some of them are related to budget. So the authors mention that Global South partners are asked to comment on finalized grant proposals, and they are asked to agree on predefined budgets. And of course they do, because there is a neediness for research money and also a neediness for their own money, because there are low salaries for some of the universities in Global South. Then when their grant is awarded, there is heavy financial reporting that's required for them. And this happens in a complex web of conflicting interest between funding agencies, universities, and academics. This month, I don't know if I can take this off. Okay, maybe that's better. So this is another comment this month in the Lancet Global Health, and identifies another source of budget inequity. So this is payment in arrears. So this is where you have a lead organization in Global North that should contract Global South institutions and channel money from Global North to South. And what happens is sometimes this money is channeled after the research has started or even after the research has ended. And the Global South institutions are out of pocket for some time, creating financial pressures for them. So there are various resources on equitable partnerships. Various resources on equitable partnerships, with the most famous around here being the African Charter, which was developed by PAC, which is based here in Bristol, and some members of PAC are in the audience. But these resources are not specific to budgets. And so the uniqueness of this toolkit is that it delves deep into the budget issues and recommends practices for equity in budget allocation and spending. So to inform this toolkit, we did some empirical work, just as we did for the Visa and Passport Equity Toolkit. And we interviewed 8 academics, 7 of them based here in University of Bristol and 1 from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Cumulatively, they had 122 years of experience working or collaborating with Global South. They were from various disciplines, including social sciences, health sciences, and engineering. And they had a number of successful grants from 19 funders. And you can see the word cloud map there. The most common funder was UKRI. And they had partnered with institutions and individuals from 23 countries. And you can see the map there showing the 23 countries, the representation from South America, Africa, and Asia. So the first thing we did when developing this toolkit was to define what an equitable budget allocation is. And we defined it as an appropriate and fair share of budget to implement an equitable, transformative, and inclusive research collaboration. So it's not a superficial 50-50 split between Global North and South, because we discovered that even that could be inequitable. We then identified what things should come together for you to have an equitable budget allocation. So we identified 3 pillars that should work together. And one is equitable partnerships, with the rationale being there can't be equity in budgets if there's no equity in partnership. The next one was systems, and systems were universities, funders, policies on funding, generation, research, and financial management infrastructure. And these should support budget equity. And then finally, the principle and values was another pillar, which is the main focus of the toolkit. And these are issues and practices that you can do as a researcher or a research support professional to promote budget equity in terms of allocation and spending. So these are the principles and values. And these principles and values are situated in the grant life cycle. So starting off with before grant application, it's important to plan and connect. To connect with the partners, to know their priorities, to know their context and situations, to plan ahead so that you allow enough time for for developing a grant application. It's important to understand the funding call, to know what direct costs are allowed, what indirect costs are allowed, and what costs are not allowed. And also whether the money can be channeled directly to the Global South partner and their institution. When it comes to grant writing, it's important to have autonomy and fairness in budget generation. So allow the partners to generate their budgets, individual budgets, and then you harmonize for the collaboration. It's important to cost everything and do it fairly, including visa costs that sometimes are overlooked. After you've been successfully awarded the grant, it's important to disburse the money in a timely manner. It's important to acknowledge and trust the partners to be able to manage their share of the budget efficiently. Throughout the collaboration, it's important to acknowledge power and commit to equity. It's important to build capacity of researchers so that they don't have to depend on a Global North partner to win grants, and of the research management infrastructure in the Global South institutions. Flexibility for equity, these are adjustments that you can advocate for in institutions and funders that would promote equity. And then being reflexive and feedbacking for change. This is feedback to stakeholders, to funders, to institutions, and fellow researchers so as to promote budget equity. Now, I'll not go into detail on these principles and values, but the bulk of the toolkit will have each of these principles and values with some issues that you need to consider and sometimes examples. And then for each of these principles and values, there are questions for reflection and discussion. So when you get hold of the toolkit, you'll see what we mention on each of the principles and values. Now, I'll just go back to the issues I raised and what applies to the toolkit on those issues. So the first issue, it seems the first two pillars are not there because there isn't an equitable partnership, if there is a partnership at all. The systems that the funders and the institutions in Global North, which were awarded the $30 million US, were not supporting budget equity. But then in the principles and values, we also have this principle and value, which is acknowledging power and committing to equity. And this is something you should do throughout the collaboration. On the second issues that were I presented on, predefined budgets, neediness, and heavy financial reporting, we recommend planning and connecting. So knowing your partner and allowing time for co-developing the grant application, which was not done if you're asking the partner to agree to a predefined budget. Autonomy and fairness in budget generation. So allow partners to develop individual budgets and then harmonize. And the heavy financial reporting, we don't cover this directly, but in the flexibility for equity, this is something that you could advocate to the university departments to just do enough financial reporting, because financial reporting is required, and not heavy financial reporting that burdens the Global South partner. And on the last issue on payment in arrears, we cover this directly in the toolkit. We mention timely disbursements, and we mention advance payments, such as paying quarterly in advance. We also touch on this issue on the flexibility for equity on advocating for timely payments. So I'll just mention before I invite Marcus, who has arrived to address us, I'll just mention what we've done on dissemination so far and where we want to go. So this is Dapo and myself in Warwick last year for the International Research Culture Conference, where we had posters on each of the toolkits. Simon will speak to this, but recently he was in Tanzania, where he distributed the toolkit to 104 attendees in a research managers workshop. And for the future and moving forward, it will take a village to implement and disseminate these toolkits. So we ask you to use them and to share them widely. We are happy to do presentations and introduce the toolkits to other audiences if you invite us, and if visa and passport inequities do not come on our way. And we are happy for you to introduce the toolkits to others. So we could support you with a slide deck and any other support for you to introduce the toolkits to other audiences. We are happy for the toolkits to be hosted in other platforms. It's hosted in a digital resource platform by the university, but we can signpost them from other websites and platforms so that people can come there, or we could host them in other platforms. Someone mentioned that they will be recommending the toolkits to their students as part of the reading list, and this is something you could do, and as part of PhD resources, especially for those working in Global South. In the next year, we are planning to have 2 academic articles for each of the toolkits to disseminate that to the academic community. We are in conversation with Policy Bristol on the feasibility of having any of the issues as a policy brief, and we welcome any feedback on the use of the toolkits and improvements for the next versions. So with that, I invite Professor Marcus Munafo, whose team funded this work, to address us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, real pleasure to be here today. And the address sounds rather grand. I'm just going to say a few words about how this fits into the kind of wider culture work that we've been doing across the university. But it's great to see this come to life. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier, but the meeting clashed with the University Research Committee, and it was my last one, so I had to be there. So I am Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research Culture, at least for the next 6 weeks. The process is about to start for finding me a replacement. So if you know anyone who would be interested in this kind of role, then there should be an advert out for that shortly. But as was mentioned, this work is part of our wider research culture program that has been running for about 3 years now. And we have a research culture vision and strategic plan and an annual implementation plan that is about how we then bring that to life. If you haven't seen it, just go to the University of Bristol SharePoint and search for research culture, and it's all there, including resources to some of the other projects that we've been funding. And I think we've done a reasonably good job of developing a program of work that is intended to take the university to where we would like it to be by 2030 in terms of being a vibrant, thriving, supportive community that allows everyone to do their best work and do it in a way that is aligned with our values, explicit and implicit, if you like. And as part of that, we've identified 5 priority areas that are around openness and transparency in how we work, good leadership and management at all levels, providing career opportunities, encouraging diversity of those involved in research and of the research that we do, and in particular fostering collaboration and innovative approaches to collaboration. And I think this work cuts across all of those actually to some extent, but particularly perhaps that last one. And it's great to see it mature to this point. One of the things that we were keen to do when we started the culture program was to put out an open call for ideas, partly to surface what was already going on and what ideas people had and what seeds of ideas were beginning to germinate across the university, so that we could then support those and grow those to the point where they become mature projects like this one that can really have an impact not just on Bristol, but on the sector as a whole. And one of the things that we've tried to do as much as possible across our research culture activity is make the resources freely and widely available so that the whole sector can benefit from them. I think it would be contrary to the spirit of a positive research culture if we just did all of this for ourselves. And again, I think that's something that comes out very strongly in this project, that this is about equitable partnerships and using the privilege that we have as an institution and that we have in the global north to give a boost to those who don't have those advantages and ensure that we work in ways that benefit everybody, not just selfishly ourselves. So one of the things I would be really keen to encourage you all to do is to get this out, not just to other colleagues at Bristol, but across the sector more widely. And again, if there's anything that the culture team can do to help with that, and we have other avenues at Bristol, like Policy Bristol, that you're already plugged into that can help with that as well, then just let us know, because I think it's really important for this kind of work to be done as widely as possible across the sector. And of course, this project is inherently collaborative in that way. So it's already doing that, but the more that we can do to promote it, the better. It links quite nicely to some of the big ticket projects that we've been funding across the culture programs. So those are the leadership ethos. There's a website that is about leadership as a behavior and how we can all demonstrate leadership wherever we happen to sit within an organization. There's a working well together resource that's still being developed. It's about how we can work well as teams collectively. And there's the inclusive research toolkit, which is about how we can develop research projects in ways that are inclusive from the ground up, if you like, that are designed to be inclusive in terms of the type of research that's done, in terms of who participates in that research, and so on. And then we have a lot of work happening around open research. And again, I think this project cuts across all of those different initiatives, but all of those different initiatives are being done in a way that is, again, outward-facing, collaborative, being done for the benefit of the sector rather than just Bristol. So this very much aligns with that. The one thing I would say is that something that we've experienced throughout the culture program, and I imagine it's true today, is that the people who come to these meetings are not the people who need to be in these meetings. They're the people who are already on board. They're the people who believe in this stuff and understand the importance of this stuff and want to do something about it. We are not the people that we need to convince. The really hard work, once you've got to this point, is getting this out so that it becomes business as usual on the shop floor, if you like, so that we're all doing this. And that's much harder to do. So one of the things that I am keen to do in the time that I've got left and to hand over to my successor is to make sure that the next phase of our culture program is about bringing this to life on the ground, getting this out into the faculties, into the schools, into the departments, into the research groups, and articulating not just the moral benefits of working in this way, but the pragmatic benefits of working in this way. But that by working in this way, yes, we're doing the right thing, but we're also doing better research and more impactful research, and research that's going to give us an advantage in the ref. Those are the stories you need to tell to convince the unconverted, if you like. And we all, those of us in the room, need to be going out and doing that on the ground as advocates for this kind of work. Otherwise, it's not going to make nearly as much of a difference as it could do. And for work of this quality and of this value, not to become part of business as usual, not to become part of the wallpaper of how we work at Bristol would be a real missed opportunity, I think. So however much I think we should celebrate the work that's gone into this to date and where you've got to so far, to some extent, the really hard work starts now, getting it out onto the shop floor. But if we can do that next step with the support of the culture team if that's helpful, then that's what will make a real difference, I think. So thank you for inviting me. It's great to see what you've done. I think it's hugely impressive. Let's make sure that that next part happened as well. Not just for this, for everything that we're doing around creating a positive research culture, because we want Bristol to be good at what it does in a way that is also good for the people who do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcus, for that address. So we'll have a series of short talks, 5 minutes, from various speakers, and then after that we'll have a session of question, answer, and discussion. So to start off is Celia.
Hey, thank you, Anthony. Thanks for inviting me. It's difficult to only speak for 5 minutes. I'll do my best. So I have a few different hats, one of which is I'm an NIHR Global Health Research Professor of Healthy Aging. And that means I spend half the year as co-director of the Health Research Unit Zimbabwe. And I say hello to those online. I've seen some names I recognize. And in fact, just got back on Sunday, having spent the beginning of the year in Harare. I'm also a professor of clinical epidemiology. I'm a geriatrician. When I'm in the UK, I still do a bit of NHS consultant time. And I lead the Global Health and Aging Research Unit here in the University of Bristol. And Anthony asked me to talk about my academic perspective from a global North researcher active in the global South on the TETSO toolkits. So that's what I'm going to try and do. But he also wanted me to just introduce through ZIM, so the Health Research Unit Zimbabwe, which I'm one of the co-directors of, based in Harare, sits within the Biomedical Research and Training Institute, BRTI. So BRTI is a not-for-profit, non-governmental organization, and we're one of the units that sits within that institute. And at you can scan that with your phone if you want to go to our website. But at the very heart of through ZIM is this idea about training and capacity building through high quality research. That's the core of what we do. And we aim to be responsive to local, national, regional challenges. So, if there is a cholera epidemic in Harare, then we do cholera research. If there's a COVID epidemic, then we do COVID research. If there's a recognition in hospitals that aging is now an issue, then we do age-related research. So it is responsive to local need. This is a core value. And it's embedded within the Zimbabwean healthcare system and within communities. So we don't have a shiny standalone building. We do our research in clinics, in communities, in rural and urban settings, in the public hospital system, which often has a lot of infrastructural challenges. Our research is delivered with partnerships. As you might imagine, most of those are South-South partnerships, but also South-North, and I'm part of that North partnership. But also partnerships with government, academic, UN agencies, NGOs. So we have a wide spread of different partnerships that enable us to do what it is that we do in Zimbabwe. And we have a diversity in funding sources, obviously important given certain withdrawal of some funding resources recently that's having a very large impact in Zimbabwe and the region. But we have funders, a lot from the UK, but also from the European Union, other African funders and Canadian funding as well. And so we have a dedicated focus on research culture in Zimbabwe and the development of local research leadership. And our vision as co-directors is that by the time I retire, the likes of me from the Global North don't have a role at all to play in the Global South. It's entirely run by Global South researchers who have been upskilled and whose capacity has been developed through this unit. This is the vision. So the scope of the research, we have a lot of themes, obviously infection, very strong focus because that's where the country has been, but we're now much more thinking about multimorbidity, aging, musculoskeletal disease because of the epidemiological transition. We have population-based studies in neonates all the way through to end-of-life palliative care. So the full life course is sort of catered for. And then we have a lot of different disciplines with a very strong social science, epidemiology, but also implementation science theme within the unit. We have just over 120 staff. We have 25 PhD fellowships, funded a lot of those by big hitting funders like Wellcome. We've got 7 postdoctoral fellowships, 5 of whom are funded by the Wellcome Trust. So they're high quality fellowships doing internationally recognized science. So thinking now about the TEPSO and the equitable budgeting, I pulled out 3 of the kind of infographics from the slides that Anthony has already shown. Plan and connect, I think that is so important. You can't just write a big grant with a bunch of people who you don't really know, you don't really understand, and you don't really understand the context in which people work. And so Sarah, who sat at the back of the room, this was a £20,000 pump priming, speaking to what you said, Richard, about those small grants that actually create an opportunity for people to get together. We went down to, this is in Durban, quite a lot of years ago now, and we sat down and we said, okay, what are the key musculoskeletal questions that need to be answered in the African region? And how are we going to get money? Where do we go for money? What do we do? And it was this meeting that enabled us to apply to the Wellcome Trust, and we got a 3.7 million collaborative award, which we're still working on. It's coming to an end now. But without that networking and that connectedness and spending a whole week together and understanding each other's agendas, we would never have got that money. Speaking to Marcus's point about REF and making that case. And here is the Christmas do in Harare in December. So these are some of the ThruZim personnel. You know, that connectedness of spending kind of downtime with people so that you understand people on a personal level, not just on a professional level. The cost everything and do it fairly. I think it's so difficult if you've never been somewhere to really understand what isn't just what you can't take for granted. You can't take for granted running water in a public health facility. You can't take for granted there will be soap or toilet paper. You have to budget for this stuff. Yes, you need to buy a phone, but you also need to budget for the airtime. People haven't got they haven't got EE monthly contracts, where they're just going to absorb costs. You need to budget for all of this stuff. If you budget for scrubs, you also need to budget for clinical washing of those scrubs, because there's no system of washing the uniforms that people are going to wear when they're collecting the data in the field that you in your study. So you really do need to cost everything. I think that really resonates within this toolkit. Timely disbursements. So through ZIM, there's no core funding. We're entirely funded through grants. So what comes in and what goes out is quite like this. It's up and down according to what grants you've got. There isn't necessarily a cash flow to be paid in arrears for the work that you're doing. I mean, very often there isn't. And so you have to pay quarterly in advance. Quarterly in arrears, this paper that was published just relatively recently completely resonated, because you have to, unfortunately, the University of Bristol is very good about doing that. And we set up a system years ago for some of my earlier grants, and that hasn't been quibbled since, which is excellent. And then thinking about these passport inequities, I mean, it really, the thing I wanted to reflect on is to recognize the emotional toll of the visa application process. So on Friday, I was in Harare and a colleague was telling me about a colleague who has had her visa denied. She's a healthcare professional who did a master's in London. She wanted to come for her graduation. She applied for the visa. It was declined. She was asked for more paperwork. Already you have to open up your soul and your entire bank account to a bunch of people in the Home Office who you don't know. It's deeply depersonalizing to share really confidential data in order to get a visa. So she shared further information and it was declined. And she was told, your visa application has been declined. The UK government considers you to be a flight risk. Imagine how that must feel. It's deeply humiliating. It's horrible. And that is happening all the time. So many times I've heard that. So I think that recognizing the emotional toll on the colleagues with whom we work, who are undermined by the Home Office, that is so real, and we have to be sensitive to that. And when we ask somebody to apply for a visa, we're asking somebody to put themselves at risk of this, and we should recognize that. Okay, that's my 5 minutes. The other thing I wanted to say really is a thank you to Anthony, because he's really led this, and it's been brilliant to see what you've done with this, how you've taken an idea and just created all of this and this event. I think it's really, I don't know if anybody else is going to thank you for that, but I think it's been a really impressive piece of work. And also thank you to Dapo, and Dapo, I'm sorry that you're not with us, but also for your enthusiasm and all of the work that you've done. Again, it's been really, really impressive. So I just wanted to say that before I finish. Thank you.
So the next speaker is Simon, who is also a member of the advisory panel. So Simon, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, hi, I'm Simon Lesser. I'm International Research Development Manager here at Bristol. I've been helping to support work around global challenges and official development assistance funded projects for about 10 years. I also help to manage internal funding to pump prime the kinds of research partnerships we've been talking about today. So if you're interested in that, come and talk to me. In terms of the visa toolkit, I just wanted to reflect on the fact that obviously, as it's been sort of already raised, these are ongoing concerns. And in fact, a number of people, including Celia, provided me with some evidence way back in 2019 when I went and attended a sector meeting with the Home Office to raise issues around the large number of visa refusals during the Global Challenge Research Fund programme. Following that, I actually helped organise a visit of UK research managers to the Visitor Visa Processing Centre in Croydon in London back in 2020, the idea being that we find out how they work there and for us to explain what the nature of these funding programmes was. Clearly from Celia's example, not much has changed, unfortunately. And Celia made a really good point about the emotional toll of visa applications. But one of the things I took away from that visit was that, you know, a lot of people don't know what research is, don't care about it, don't ever have to interact with it. And, you know, that's fair enough. But as well as the sort of individual biases or errors of staff in the Home Office or the systemic issues, I do think we need to be aware that we live, you know, what might be obvious to us isn't always obvious to others. So how we communicate what we're trying to do is important, thinking about that audience. And I think the toolkit's really great at helping to navigate the unfortunate reality. So I really appreciate Anthony and Dapo developing the toolkit. Here at Bristol, support for visitor visas in relation to research partnerships has fallen between professional services teams. No one really wants to take responsibility for it. So it's great that Anthony and Dapo have created a much needed resource. I just wanted to acknowledge also a project called Connected, funded through TCRF. The two project managers on that, Diane and Nina, did a lot of effort supporting visa applications at the time, and some of the work that they've done there is directly being contributed to the toolkit resources that you've got today. In terms of you know, how my view on the toolkit, it's great. I like how it links to the framework of fairer partnerships, and I think it's really important how it shows that it's really important to think of all the elements of visas right at the early stages of partnerships and proposals. And certainly our team in research development will promote it. Moving on to the budget toolkit, as Anthony's mentioned, there's a huge amount of literature around equitable partnerships, but it is quite unique to have this focus on a budget allocation. And I think that's really helpful for our team. And I think it also points out, as has also been mentioned by Celia, how important it is to plan early and to have potentially difficult conversations internally and externally as early as possible. I also wanted to reflect on something that the toolkit highlights, which is that in undertaking these projects, it's not just about the research, it's about the wider ecosystem. And in order to have or achieve fairer partnerships, we need to think about supporting the research management in low-resourced countries, and also to think about reflecting the way that we work with our colleagues over there. As Anthony said, I was recently in Tanzania. I think maybe Mary is on the line here from Glasgow, and she was the instigator of an amazing event where about 100 of us from the UK and around Africa and a couple of other places came together to talk about how to support international research partnerships from a research management point of view. And I've also had the opportunity on a number of other occasions to interact with colleagues abroad, and that really highlights how much we need to consider leveraging grant funding as much as we can to support research management capacity in other countries. And so I would just really urge people who are planning and undertaking research in partnerships, in these international partnerships, to not just consider capacity strengthening from a research point of view, but think about the wider ecosystem and what partners might need to undertake these projects. And saying that, I think the toolkit highlights how important it is for professional service teams to contribute to fair partnership. Written addressing researchers, but it does implicate the way that professional services teams engage. So in terms of Bristol, research development, finance, contracts. And I hope that the toolkit might encourage professional service teams to engage at an early stage and to be open to working with their counterparts overseas. Marcus mentioned the tricky thing of implementation, and I totally agree with that. It's important that researchers push for professional services to better engage with the international context. And I think that might need a bit of a culture shift and some thinking in terms of Bristol anyway about how these teams are incentivized and what their KPIs are. So we really need to get professional service leaders on board to champion fair partnerships. And that might mean reflecting on our existing processes, thinking about active knowledge sharing with international colleagues, perhaps broader language skills within professional services, and perhaps reflecting more creatively on risk and reputation and things like that. So yes, thanks. Those are my reflections on the toolkits, which I think will be very useful.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And the last, thank you. The last talk will be by Eyob, who was another member of our advisory panel.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I would also challenge myself to speak only for 5 minutes. I prepared the talk and just 3 slides, and I hope I will keep you interested in the process. So today we are gathered here to launch this toolkit for extra budget allocation for research projects in the Global South and to improve visa and passport equity in the Global North-South research partnerships. Before delving into this talk, I really would like to thank Anthony and Dapo for their great work and also my colleagues in this collective process. It was a fascinating project. So I participated in this project because of my role in the co-development of the Africa Charter for Transformative Research Collaborations, a transformative initiative that University of Bristol, in collaboration with brilliant colleagues from UCT and UNISA, we co-facilitated this Africa Charter initiative. So all my comments and views that I share now are somehow shaped by my role in this process over the past 3.5 years, which is essentially about understanding the multiple layers of power imbalances in academic scientific knowledge production, primarily conducted through international research collaborations. And I certainly believe that the toolkits that we're launching today add value to understanding inequities in the global North-South research partnerships the issue of budget and visa are, of course, problems in the day-to-day encounters of researchers based in the Global South. Probably, as you can see from this document, they enable us to and encourage us to have new perspectives, to challenge our learned assumptions about manifestations of these inequities, and also question issues that we usually take or may take for granted, but also be more intentional in our efforts of redressing power imbalances when we establish such partnerships. From the African from the African Charter point of view, the way that we see the problem is more of like we have multiple layers of power imbalances and inequities. So the budgets and passport related issues are manifestation of more fundamental problems. In that framework that we promoted in the Africa Charter, we have 6 layers from the epistemic inequities level to language inequities, extraversion of scientific research. That means usually it's produced for the consumption of the global north, not the global south. In the unidirectional development case, usually more international research partnerships are attached to development aid, so nothing that's fall outside of that is adequately supported. Inequities in national capabilities, and also, of course, unequal division of roles and the resources. From our extensive work over the past 3 years on equitable partnerships, we have become more convinced that the Charter adds significant value to the mission of realizing equity, especially because of its articulation of the inner layers of the framework, essentially the first 4 layers about epistemology, about language, about extraversion, and also the unidirectional development case. So that, and these are quite very fundamental. And the more that we focus on this, the more that then we can also address the most outer layers of the problem. Because the outer layers that are related to institutional capabilities, such as like limited human, financial, and material resources to run complex research projects or contract management and administration, limited technological or infrastructural endowments, are manifestations of other core problems, or the unequal division of roles and the practical arrangement such as authorship and recognition, physical mobilities or access to opportunities or denials, and all the issues that are related to unequal exchange in this process of collective knowledge production are, for me, essentially the manifestation that we see related to a more fundamental problem. So I put the focus and the contributions of these 2 toolkits toward this redressing power imbalances manifested in the outer layers. As you can see from the latest UNESCO science report, the amount of research that's being invested in developing research capacity is significantly high in the global north and very low in the global south. And you can have all the historical, political, economy analysis why that is the case. And what we see now, what we have in our hands, is these toolkits are essentially reminders of the challenge that we must overcome for fair and respectful processes and systems of academic knowledge production using international research partnerships. Some of the issues articulated in the toolkits might not be factors we may consider depending on our positionalities in the academic research ecosystem. However, they might be enormous concerns for many others. They might be source of anxiety, challenge in career progression, and personal sacrifices. So we need these toolkits because some of the problems might be invisible from our position. Therefore, we may ignore or take our experiences for granted. And I would dare say that unless we are consciously aware of our relative privilege, we may become trapped into our own ignorance and take things for granted. For example, if we ignore the price that an academic researcher of various levels of qualification or seniority who holds a passport from the global south country, the amount of sacrifices that he or she pays, the psychological stress, the financial pressure, the time pressure, and most of the time, the inhuman and depressing treatment that she or he may encounter at every level, from the visa letters, from booking appointments, visiting embassies, sometimes not embassies, but private companies who essentially operate based on profit-making processes. And I'm sharing this from my also personal perspective. Boarding a flight, the way that you will be just seen in a very suspicious way because of your passport, because of your skin color, entering into a global north country. All these issues, we cannot just simply ignore them, and we cannot really take them for granted. Unless we are conscious of this, I think we might be abusing our relative privilege. We may also be abusing our relative privilege if we take for granted the easiness of our access to travel to someone don't want me to speak or what?
Yeah, just thank you.
Okay, so I would say, unless we are conscious of this privilege that we have, we might be somehow contributing knowingly or unknowingly for the inequities that we are trying to redress. So I'm sharing this based on my personal reflections and also the reflection that I heard from colleagues. So how can these toolkits be relevant for transformative change? The Africa Charter Framework aspires for transformative change in operations and organizations of international research partnerships by adopting a complex systems approach in its theory of change. This means that transformative change is not a unilinear process of moving from point A to Z or point A to B, or transformative change cannot be achieved just by technical solutions alone, which may require having more financial, technical knowledge, skills, and instruments. Transformative change is an outcome of complex processes that involves change in consciousness and understanding from the individual to the collective level, change in the way that we access, distribute, control, and produce resources, change in the policy and legal frameworks that dictate and shape the distribution of resources so that possibilities or initiative of such kinds of practices that challenge our consciousness or learning and thinking and rethinking can happen, and also transformative changes in the values or norms of the everyday nitty-gritty processes where inequity become unacceptable. These are the four domains that are intertwined, and each of them require our equal attention. And I consider the two toolkits we are launching today speak to all these issues at the consciousness level that visa application processes can be traumatizing, stressful, or being interrogated at the border, being singled out, or being held in a separate room just because you are somebody who holds this passport. This is from having this experience multiple times, or being seen just suspicious just because, you are a Black person or a person who has a different passport. Resources allocation of sufficient time for the consultation of co-developing budgets and issuing of visa letters in time. Legal frameworks, sometimes some legal processes that are seemingly rational, neutral, may perpetuate inequities. Being legal doesn't necessarily mean being right. Sometimes what's legal is completely immoral and wrong. Finally, going beyond the visible, I will try to end here. Over the past 3.5 years, my work on the politics of academic knowledge production through international research partnerships and the Africa Charter showed me that whenever questions of equity, fairness, transformation are raised, the following four issues become to the foreground, sometimes precluding more fundamental and difficult conversation from happening. One, we tend to gravitate to the outer layers of the power imbalances that I mentioned earlier, to remain more fixated on the most visible aspects of the problem, the more visible portion of the iceberg, if you want. But let's not forget that the most visible portion of the iceberg is just simply very small. A fundamental aspect of the problem is below the sea. So we should be able to see what's not visible for our naked eye. So yes, institutional variations and challenges in practical arrangements that both the budget allocation and the passport issues are trying to address are important, but we cannot just simply tinker on the edge. There are fundamental issues that cause that problem. Second, most equitable partnership frameworks, I think the toolkit kind of relates to that, are filled with normative notions of fairness, equity, honesty, respect, and authenticity. Very important values, but also very much informed by abstract ideas and concepts. There's very little systematically developed, inductively generated orientations toward formulating these values and principles. And on a related note, I believe the number 3 is that the learning from the lived experiences and day-to-day encounters of global South researchers, irrespective of their geographic location, is also missing. I think the toolkit did a great job by collecting at least personal interviews from people's experiences, but the most dominant ones really don't do that at a larger scale level or in a very systematic way. Global South researchers based in the global north also travel to global south or global north countries for various reasons, including research partnerships, and face the same problem in different forms and shapes that perpetuate inequities. Finally, I think we should be very conscious of the dangers of instrumentalization of transformative initiatives, especially in the UK context, where the higher education sector operates using the logics of the financial sector, where winning more or becoming on top of that artificially created hierarchy or ranking are the more driving factors of the way that you operate. So that some universities and actors are in this game for the sake of being mastering that ranking and hierarchy, so that that transformative element is not intrinsic value that they believe in, but rather something from which that they can get more in terms of course, market value, whatever. I call this terms and conditions approach. Whenever you listen to an advert on the radio, there is a very, like probably 5-second these conditions apply kind of section. You don't really pay too much attention to that detail. And sometimes we have lots of toolkits and procedures, but they are very much in the background, and what drives the day-to-day operation is essentially just simply being on top of okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Eyob. So we get to the end of the presentations, and I'll stop sharing.